He ruled Zambia for 7 years and left behind a trail of both love and controversy. Was Edgar Lungu a hero of the people, a failed leader, or simply a misunderstood man navigating complex times? Today, we take a balanced and honest look at the legacy of Zambia's 6th president. In the story of Zambia's democracy, few figures have sparked as much admiration and as much division as Edgar Chagwa Lungu. A trained lawyer turned reluctant president, Lungu governed Zambia during a time of economic uncertainty, political tension, and shifting international alliances. Now, with his passing, the nation is left to ask, was Edgar Lungu a hero who tried his best, a villain who failed the people, or simply a misunderstood leader caught in the storm of politics? In this InspirAfrica official exclusive, we take a deeper look at the complex legacy of Zambia's 6th Republican president. Zambia Edgar Chagwa Lungu remains one of Zambia's most talked about leaders. In this exclusive documentary by InspirAfrica official, we explore the highs and lows of his presidency, from infrastructure achievements to political tensions and personal battles. What you'll discover: Lungu's rise from lawyer to president, his biggest achievements in office, the controversies that defined his time, public opinions from PF supporters to critics, the emotional aftermath of his passing, and how history might judge him. Was Lungu a nation builder, a divider, or something more complex? Edgar Lungu, a divisive figure? Edgar Chagwa Lungu, Zambia's 6th president from 2015 to 2021, remains one of the most polarizing figures in the nation's political history. His presidency, marked by significant infrastructure development and economic challenges, elicited strong reactions from supporters and critics alike. To his supporters, Lungu was a charismatic leader who prioritized Zambia's development, strengthened its global standing, and fostered unity under the Patriotic Front (PF). To his detractors, he was an authoritarian figure whose governance eroded democratic institutions, suppressed dissent, and exacerbated economic woes through mismanagement. This duality, celebrated by some as a hero and condemned by others as a threat to democracy, defines Lungu's legacy as a divisive figure. Lungu's divisiveness stems from his governance style, policy decisions, and personal rivalry with his successor, HHvsLungu. His supporters, including figures like Wicknell Chiveo, hailed him as one of Zambia's greatest presidents, crediting him with transformative infrastructure projects and regional connectivity. However, critics, such as Zambian academic Sishiwa, argue that his presidency caused incalculable damage, particularly through economic mismanagement and democratic backsliding. The polarized reactions to his leadership were evident during his tenure, in the 2021 election, and even after his death in 2025, when disputes over his funeral arrangements underscored lingering tensions. His ability to unite the PF while alienating opposition supporters and international observers highlights the complex, often contradictory nature of his political persona. Lungu's divisiveness also reflects Zambia's broader political landscape, where economic challenges, regional loyalties, and historical power struggles shape public opinion. His tenure saw Zambia grapple with a debt crisis, rising inflation, and accusations of electoral manipulation, which fueled opposition narratives of authoritarianism. Yet, his infrastructure achievements and ability to maintain PF cohesion earned him a loyal base. This dichotomy between development and repression, progress and regression, makes Lungu a figure whose legacy will continue to spark debate. From lawyer to leader, Lungu's political rise. Edgar Lungu's journey from a lawyer to Zambia's president is a story of resilience, opportunity, and political maneuvering. Born on November 11, 1956, in Dola, Zambia's Copperbelt region, Lungu grew up in a resource-rich but economically volatile area. He earned a law degree from the University of Zambia in 1981 and began his career at Andre Massey and Company Advocates in Lusaka. His early professional life was not without challenges. In 2010, the Law Association of Zambia suspended his law practice license due to professional misconduct, a setback that foreshadowed the controversies that would mark his political career. Lungu's entry into politics was gradual. After undergoing military training at Miltes in Kabwe, he worked at Barclays Bank and Zambia Consolidated Copper Mines, gaining diverse professional experience. His political career began in earnest in the 1990s when he ran as an independent candidate for the Chiwama constituency in the 1996 general election, though he lost to Kristen Tembo of the Movement for Multiparty Democracy (MMD). His persistence paid off in 2011 when he won a seat in the National Assembly as a PF candidate under Michael Satta's leadership. Lungu's rise within the PF was meteoric. Under President Satta, he served as Minister of Justice and Minister of Defense, roles that positioned him as a key figure in the party. Satta's death in October 2014 created a leadership vacuum, and Lungu emerged as a compromise candidate within the PF. His selection as the PF's presidential candidate at a controversial national convention in Kabwe, where no voting took place and delegates elected him by raising hands, highlighted his ability to navigate internal party dynamics. In the January 2015 presidential by-election, Lungu narrowly defeated HHvsLungu of the United Party for National Development (UPND), securing the presidency to complete Satta's term. He won a full term in 2016, again narrowly defeating HHvsLungu, cementing his status as Zambia's leader. Lungu's ascent was driven by his unassuming demeanor, which made him a unifying figure within the PF and his ability to leverage SADA's legacy. However, his rise was not without controversy, as critics questioned the legitimacy of his candidacy and the PF's internal processes. His legal background, military training, and political adaptability enabled him to transition from a relatively obscure lawyer to a national leader, but his governance would soon test Zambia's democratic institutions and economic stability. Achievements in infrastructure and economy. Lungu's presidency is often associated with significant infrastructure development, a cornerstone of his administration's legacy. His government prioritized road construction, energy projects, and urban development, aiming to modernize Zambia and enhance regional connectivity. Supporters credit him with transformative projects, such as the expansion of road networks, which improved access to rural areas and facilitated trade. Notable initiatives included upgrades to Zambia's transportation infrastructure, which bolstered connectivity with neighboring countries, and investments in energy projects to address power shortages. These efforts were part of Lungu's campaign promise to build on physical infrastructure, which he touted during the 2016 and 2021 elections. Another significant achievement was the 2016 constitutional reform, which introduced measures like a 50% plus one vote threshold for presidential elections and a fixed election day, aiming to strengthen democratic processes. Lungu's administration also made strides in gender representation, appointing Zambia's first female vice president, and achieving a high number of female cabinet ministers. These moves were praised as progressive steps toward inclusivity. Economically, however, Lungu's record is mixed. While he aimed to leverage Zambia's copper wealth and infrastructure investments to drive growth, his tenure coincided with significant challenges. The global decline in copper prices, which account for 70% of Zambia's exports, strained the economy. Lungu's government increased foreign borrowing to finance infrastructure projects, leading to a debt crisis. By 2020, Zambia became the first African nation to default on its international debt during the COVID-19 pandemic, with inflation reaching 15% and the kwacha devaluing by over 50%. Critics argue that these economic woes were exacerbated by undisciplined borrowing and mismanagement, with the Financial Intelligence Center reporting corruption-related losses of approximately $284 million in 2018 Africa. Despite these challenges, Lungu supporters argue that his infrastructure investments laid the foundation for long-term growth, even if short-term economic conditions were dire. His efforts to strengthen Zambia's global standing through diplomatic relations also earned praise, though strained ties with Western donors and the International Monetary Fund (IMF) complicated economic recovery efforts. Lungu's economic legacy is thus a paradox: ambitious development marred by financial instability. Controversies during his presidency. Lungu's presidency was fraught with controversies that fueled accusations of authoritarianism and mismanagement. One of the most significant was the third-term bid controversy. Critics argued that Lungu sought to exploit constitutional loopholes to extend his presidency beyond the two-term limit, a move that echoed similar attempts by other African leaders. The 2016 constitution, while progressive in some aspects, contained ambiguities that Lungu's administration leveraged to argue that his partial term from 2015 to 2016 did not count toward the limit. The Constitutional Court's 2018 ruling in favor of his eligibility to run in 2021 was widely criticized as evidence of judicial politicization, with Lungu himself warning the judiciary against emulating Kenya's Supreme Court, which had nullified a presidential election in 2017. This controversy undermined public trust in democratic institutions and intensified opposition claims of rigging. Lungu's administration was also accused of undermining democratic norms through media suppression and opposition harassment. Independent media outlets faced closures, and laws like the Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act were criticized for restricting online dissent. The arrest of opposition leader HHvsLungu in 2017 on treason charges, stemming from an incident where his convoy allegedly failed to yield to Lungu's motorcade, was a flashpoint. HHvsLungu's 4-month detention in degrading conditions, including solitary confinement, drew international condemnation and highlighted Lungu's heavy-handed approach to dissent. Other opposition figures, such as Fresher Sewali, faced imprisonment for questioning Lungu's identity, further fueling accusations of human rights violations. Corruption allegations were another major controversy. A 2019 memo from the Zambian Financial Intelligence Center alleged that Lungu had accumulated wealth through corrupt activities, including receiving bribes in the form of land and monetary gifts from a Zambian Swazi construction magnate. These allegations, though not pursued during Lungu's tenure, resurfaced after his 2021 defeat, contributing to perceptions of widespread graft. The suspension of $34 million in aid by Finland, Ireland, Sweden, and the UK in 2018 due to corruption concerns further damaged his administration's credibility. Lungu's government also faced criticism for economic mismanagement. The debt crisis, exacerbated by borrowing for infrastructure projects, led to Zambia's default in 2020, crippling the economy and driving inflation to a 2-decade high. Critics, including Sishiwa, argue that Lungu inherited a nearly debt-free country from SADA and left it saddled with unsustainable debt. These controversies, constitutional manipulation, suppression of dissent, and economic mismanagement cemented Lungu's reputation as a leader willing to prioritize power over democratic principles. Public perception: loved and criticized. Public perception of Edgar Lungu was deeply polarized, reflecting his achievements and controversies. His supporters viewed him as a dedicated leader who prioritized Zambia's development and stability. His infrastructure projects, such as road and energy developments, resonated with many Zambians, particularly in PF strongholds, who saw tangible improvements in their communities. Lungu's unassuming demeanor and ability to connect with ordinary citizens, such as through public jogging events, endeared him to a significant portion of the electorate. His Baptist faith and invocation of Zambia's One Zambia, One Nation motto further bolstered his image as a unifying figure. Posts on X, such as one by Wicknell Cheveo, reflect this admiration, describing Lungu as one of Zambia's greatest presidents and an African hero. However, Lungu faced intense criticism from a broad segment of society, including opposition supporters, civil society, and international observers. His administration's authoritarian tendencies, media crackdowns, opposition arrests, and judicial interference alienated many Zambians who valued democratic freedoms. The 2021 election campaign highlighted widespread dissatisfaction, with voters frustrated by economic hardships, including soaring inflation and unemployment. Critics like Sishiwa were scathing, arguing that Lungu's only positive contribution was his electoral defeat, which allowed for democratic renewal. Others accused him of using religion to manipulate voters, with one ex-post noting his frequent Bible quoting as a tactic to hypnotize the masses. Lungu's rivalry with HHvsLungu further shaped public perception. His supporters saw HHvsLungu's policies as vindictive, particularly after Lungu's retirement benefits were revoked and his movements restricted post-2021. Conversely, HHvsLungu's base viewed Lungu's return to politics in 2023 as opportunistic, capitalizing on economic discontent to undermine the new government. This polarization persisted after his death, with disputes over his funeral arrangements reflecting unresolved tensions between his family, the PF, and HHvsLungu's government. Lungu's legacy thus remains a battleground, with love and criticism coexisting in Zambia's collective memory. Lungu's role in democracy and human rights. Lungu's presidency had a complex and largely negative impact on Zambia's democracy and human rights. While he oversaw the 2016 constitutional reform, which introduced progressive measures like the 50% plus one vote threshold, his administration's actions often undermined democratic institutions. The politicization of the judiciary, particularly the Constitutional Court's 2018 ruling on his third-term eligibility, was seen as a direct assault on checks and balances. Lungu's public warning to the judiciary not to emulate Kenya's independent courts further eroded confidence in judicial independence. Human rights under Lungu's tenure deteriorated significantly. The arrest of opposition figures such as HHvsLungu in 2017 and Fresher Sawali in 2018 signaled a clampdown on dissent. The use of defamation laws and the Cybersecurity and Cybercrimes Act to silence critics restricted freedoms of expression and assembly. Media outlets critical of the government were shut down, and activists faced intimidation, prompting condemnation from human rights groups. The 2020 riots, linked to rumors of ritual killings, saw Lungu's government use emergency powers to control unrest, further curbing civil liberties. Lungu's supporters argue that his actions were necessary to maintain stability in a politically volatile environment. They point to his infrastructure achievements and diplomatic efforts as evidence of his commitment to Zambia's development. However, critics contend that his administration weakened democratic norms by prioritizing power retention over institutional integrity. The opposition's consistent allegations of electoral rigging, particularly in 2016 and 2021, and the government's manipulation of voter rolls in PF strongholds, reinforced perceptions of democratic erosion. Lungu's graceful concession after the 2021 election was a rare positive note, earning praise as a step toward democratic maturity, but it did little to offset the broader damage to democratic institutions during his tenure. The 2021 election defeat and retirement. The 2021 presidential election marked a turning point for Lungu and Zambia. Facing HHvsLungu for the third time, Lungu campaigned on his infrastructure achievements and increased government control over Zambia's mines. However, economic challenges, high inflation, unemployment, and a debt default undermined his campaign. Zambians, frustrated by rising living costs and corruption allegations, delivered a decisive verdict, with HHvsLungu winning 59% of the vote, defeating Lungu by nearly 1 million votes. The election was seen as a democratic opportunity to unseat an increasingly authoritarian regime, with civil society and international donors playing key roles in ensuring a peaceful transition. Lungu initially resisted the results, alleging electoral irregularities, but he conceded defeat on August 16, 2021, a move praised as a rare act of democratic grace in African politics. Following his loss, he announced his retirement from active politics, leaving Given Lubinda as the PF's acting president. However, his retirement was short-lived. In October 2023, sensing growing discontent with HHvsLungu's economic policies, Lungu announced a political comeback, aiming to lead the PF and the TONS alliance in the 2026 election. His return was controversial, with police restricting his public activities, such as jogging, labeling them political activism. Lungu claimed he was virtually under house arrest, interest, highlighting tensions with HHvsLungu's government. In December 2024, the Constitutional Court ruled that Lungu was ineligible to run in 2026, as his two terms, 2015 to 2016 and 2016 to 2021, counted as the constitutional maximum. Lungu decried the ruling as politically motivated, arguing it eroded judicial independence. Despite the setback, he remained influential in Zambian politics until his death in June 2025, with the PF relying on his charismatic authority to unify its fragmented ranks. His defeat and brief retirement underscored Zambia's democratic resilience, but also highlighted the personal and political animosity that defined his rivalry with HHvsLungu. His passing and Zambia's national reaction. Edgar Lungu died on June 5, 2025, at the age of 68 in Pretoria, South Africa, following cardiac complications from surgery for an undisclosed illness. His death shocked Zambians, given his continued political influence and recent public activities. The Zambian government declared 7 days of national mourning, with flags flown at half-mast, while Mozambique declared 3 days. Radio stations played gospel music, reflecting Zambia's Christian identity and the public's grief for a former leader who remained a significant figure. However, Lungu's passing reignited tensions between his family, the PF, and HHvsLungu's government. His family, citing his explicit wish that HHvsLungu not attend his funeral, planned a private burial in South Africa. The government, insisting on a state funeral in Zambia with full military honors, filed a last-minute court case in Pretoria to halt the burial, arguing that national interest superseded personal wishes. The Pretoria High Court postponed the burial until August 4, 2025, leaving mourners confused and highlighting the ongoing feud. The dispute echoed a similar controversy over Kenneth Kanda's burial in 2021, underscoring Zambia's struggle to balance tradition and state protocol. Public reaction was mixed. PF supporters and Lungu's family felt that HHvsLungu's government was disrespecting his legacy, while others supported the state's push for a unified national farewell. Social media posts reflected grief but also division, with some praising Lungu's contributions and others criticizing his governance. The national mourning period saw confusion over official protocols, with the PF directing mourners to its headquarters while the government designated a state lodge. Lungu's death thus became a microcosm of his divisive legacy, uniting some in grief while exposing deep-seated political rifts. Final reflections. How will history judge him? History's judgment of Edgar Lungu will likely be as polarized as his life and presidency. His supporters will remember him as a transformative leader who prioritized infrastructure, strengthened Zambia's global standing, and appointed women to high office. His road-building program, constitutional reforms, and diplomatic efforts will be cited as evidence of his commitment to Zambia's development. His graceful concession in 2021, a rarity in African politics, will also bolster his legacy among those who value democratic transitions. However, critics will argue that Lungu's presidency weakened Zambia's democratic fabric and economic stability. His administration's authoritarian tendencies, judicial manipulation, media suppression, and opposition harassment left a lasting stain on his record. The debt crisis, corruption allegations, and human rights violations will weigh heavily against him, with figures like Sishiwa asserting that his electoral defeat was his greatest contribution to democracy. The economic hardship faced by Zambians, coupled with his third-term bid, will fuel narratives of power-hungry leadership. Lungu's legacy will also be shaped by Zambia's political trajectory post-2021. If HHvsLungu's government fails to address economic challenges, Lungu's infrastructure achievements may gain retrospective appreciation. Conversely, if democratic institutions strengthen, his authoritarian tendencies will be judged harshly. The ongoing feud over his funeral suggests that his legacy will remain contested, with personal animosities and political rivalries coloring historical narratives. Ultimately, history will likely view Lungu as a complex figure, a lawyer-turned-leader whose ambition and achievements were marred by governance failures and democratic erosion, leaving Zambia at a crossroads between progress and regression.